Hi, and welcome to RPPR, Role Playing Public Radio. This is episode 3, when games go bump in the night.
By the way, Ross, do we really need the announcer voice when you intro this thing?
Yes! Okay, no, I guess we don't, but, I like the announcer voice. I think it's fun.
Well, if it works for you, fine, but I'm just saying I don't think it's necessary.
Well, I'm trying to... It's called showmanship, okay? Showmanship, entertainment, but
isn't that what we're doing? Do we really need that?
That's why the announcer voice is so essential. Okay, we're getting beyond the point. We're talking. This is October, and it's or at least it will be for a few more days. So it's Halloween and horror month and all that jazz.
We went off for a while, but we're back, and because Ross had to go visit his brother in Washington.
Yes, it was actually pretty fun. I went to the one small thing. I went to the Small Press Expo, which is a comic book convention. Met a lot of webcomic people like the guy Nicholas Gurevich from the Perry Bible Fellowship. And if you notice on the RPPR website, I got 18 different artists to sketch what they think the sequel to the Oregon Trail would look like. As you know, we've done our own rendition of that, Oregon Trail 13, Trail Harder. But each of these artists had a very different idea. I was very surprised how everyone had their own version of what they think the sequel would look like.
But that explains why you went off the air, because Ross thought family was more important than entertaining all of you.
Well, yeah, I guess. And
he betrayed you, but yes. I haven't.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for driving a wedge between the audience and me. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All right. Anyways, again, back to the serious business of talking about role-playing games, because role-playing games are very serious. We are talking about horror games this month. Of course, there are quite a few. Horror is a very popular genre within role-playing games.
But one of the more difficult ones to pull off.
To pull off successfully. And by that, I mean, there's really a difference between horror, like, stylized games and really, scary games. And you can run a scary game in any RPG. It doesn't, you could run a scary game in Dungeons and Dragons, but we're going to focus on horror games that have been run really, have been scary, and what has not been scary at all. So
it does not take much to kill scary.
Yeah, no, especially in a role-playing game when most of the players are thinking about awesome loot that they want and or experience points and what else? And telling jokes and quoting Monty Python. So it's easy to kill.
A staple of games, quoting Monty Python.
So why don't we talk about games that have worked in terms of actually being scary, that rare coveted status? Of course, 2 years ago, actually, I ran a Hunter campaign. Hunter the Reckoning, the redheaded stepchild of the old world of darkness.
Ooh, yes, definitely.
Yeah, underappreciated, but I liked it. It was sort of a weird hybrid of being a normal human, only you weren't quite normal. You had, sort of minor supernatural abilities, and of course there were different clans basically of hunters,
but of course everything could still waste you in a second.
Yeah. So anyways, I had several players set up, and they were normal people, and I decided to do something different at the start of the game. I started the very opening of the game at a wedding. And
what's more scarier than losing all of your freedom for the next lifetime?
Or until the divorce.
Indeed.
But in this case, of course, horrible things happened at the wedding, and the players were all imbued and killed basically rots, the undead people thingies that are endemic to the hunter setting.
Read Wraith if you want to know what happened there.
Yeah, and basically they found out there was this entity called the Beast, or the Diseased Man. The details are a little sketchy in my head, and it was wanting to come into this world and do very, very bad things, into the world type stuff.
Use your imagination.
And but the players all found out each of them had a common link to this beast, and they were missing a year of their childhood. Like during middle school, all of them were at the same school, but none of them could remember it. And there was this photo of all of them together as kids in this middle school. So, of course, they had to figure out what their connection was and what that connection was to the Beast, the big bad guy. And much hunting of vampires and werewolves and things that go bump in the night that happen. But anyways, Tom, you were a player in that game.
I was.
So why do you think it was actually scary? Or tell me about the times you actually were frightened, or it was really immersive, or
Well, I must say that I think I'm not trying to, compliment you here. God forbid I ever do that.
Of course.
But you were really into it, and when the GM's really into it, that kind of gets the players to shut up and actually pay attention to what's going on. And there was one moment in particular where the ghost of this little girl was coming to either help us or we were encountering it. And you really pulled off the creepy little girl voice. And for some reason, we were dead quiet when that was happening. And I think we actually had to make a joke right after that just to kind of ground us again.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. God. Yeah, actually, I remember I was really into that game because I had the plot figured out beforehand, which usually I kind of improv my games, depending on the genre. And I would keep notes of what actually happened so things were consistent, which is not always what I do. I created this newsletter, which I still have on my computer, of HunterNet, it took place in Chicago. So there was this Windy City newsletter where this one hunter was talking about all the stuff that was happening, and people... the players could remember, oh, yeah, that's what we did 3 or 4 weeks ago, so they could remember their clues and everything like that. And it was... I think that helped build the suspension.
But a lot of things just came together in that. First of all, the players actually were going along with it and into it.
Yeah.
And not, as you say, quoting Monty Python every 5 seconds.
That's true. We actually had a good place to play, too, I think.
That empty meeting room in the dorm.
Yeah, it was the honor dorm at our college, and they had this big meeting room in the bottom, I wouldn't say the basement, but the ground floor.
Completely isolated.
Yeah, quiet. They had a big white dry erase board. And, during the weekends, all the students would actually be partying. Of course, we'd be, killing vampires and stuff like that.
Important stuff.
Yeah, important stuff. And so we had a very good room for it. And there weren't no TV, no Xbox, nothing like that. It was just us and the table and the game. And we had a lot of space, too. And I think that helped. So, yeah, that helped. And I got into it, and the players got into it, and sort of built this sort of feedback loop, I think, where everyone's like, oh, okay, this is good. We'll keep doing this. So I get more energized to, increase the game. So that's sort of, positive reinforcement.
And I think it helps that in a horror setting that you don't have characters incredibly powerful, because nothing will kill horror than being able to waste completely whatever is out there that's going bump in the night.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I thought Hunter was such a good game, because the characters had the ability to survive monsters, but they weren't capable of killing them, and even killing a few ghouls or a single vampire is actually a major victory.
I know White Wolf is kind of supposed to be horror, but is it really horror like in Werewolf when you can become a 9.5-foot blender of death, or Vampire where you're immortal with all kinds of blood powers?
Other people have said this, but especially about the old World of Darkness, I think it's closer to the superhero genre.
It really is. It's supernatural superheroes.
Yeah, it really, superheroes in leather trench coats and sunglasses and wielding katanas, and that's
katanas and machine guns and and in some games I've run Apache helicopters, but never mind.
Yeah, one of those high school games.
Oh yeah, one of them.
Yeah. So that was, I feel, sort of create clues, put work into it, and the players. I think everyone also wanted a scary game. I think players to get into it, you kind of have to want to be scared.
I mean, it was the perfect time to do it. We usually started at 11.
Yeah, we started pretty late, like 9 or 10, I think. We started.
So it's late, and actually, I find when people are actually getting are a little tired, things tend to work a little more.
Yeah, the thing is, you can't have a player who doesn't want to be scared, who refuses. And it's like a horror movie. I mean, I think it's really lame when people say, oh, that movie doesn't scare me. I mean, it's a movie. Of course it's not going to scare you unless you want to be scared. You want that emotional rise, and oh wow, that
and yeah, it is easy.
Rush.
I mean, horror movies, it is easy to be completely desensitized to them.
Yeah,
because you know the formula.
Yeah, exactly.
You could point it out every step of the movie.
Yeah, some movies will trip you up, but still, it's
the same thing with role playing games.
Yeah, you have to want to get involved in it. Immerse yourself, suspend,
and everyone has to do it.
Yeah.
If you even one player out of that,
yeah, one jackass can really ruin the mood.
Luckily, we were jackass free in that game.
Yeah, who else was in it? I mean, there was John, Matt,
Aaron was in it.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Wow. Oh, yeah. I remember that. God, who else was in it? Anyways, that's neither here nor now. So that was. I'll post links to those text documents on
So you can read
RPPR.
and see how great we were.
Or get an idea of what it takes. It doesn't take a lot of work, actually, as a GM. And one thing I did was some of the players got involved. I had them write up posts to HunterNet, and I gave them bonus experience points. So, rewarding players for that, going above and beyond just showing up and rolling the dice, that will help too.
And I think if there's written stuff written about the game you just did, people want to read about it.
Yeah. I think
the players certainly want to read about it.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, now that I remember it, I recorded some of those sessions.
Yeah, you did.
I will find those MP3s and upload them, so you can listen in for that session. That's, I think, sort of the key. Those are the key elements of a good horror game. I think having tools or props to immerse you in the game, having players who want to collaborate, and putting in the work yourself, because it takes more work than just rolling up a dungeon and a couple of random encounters.
Action games are easy.
Yeah,
horror games are
just
hard.
think of what action movie you want to rip off and throw in orcs or mutants. If it's sci-fi, it's mutants. If it's fantasy, it's orcs, or zombies if it's horror.
Well, zombies, yeah.
Or vampires.
They got to have zombies.
Or, it could be vampires. Or ghouls or whatever the hell.
Undead.
There's always a mook race. There's always,
there's
no matter what the genre, there's always mooks. And by mooks, I mean, easily killed generic foes.
Whose purpose is to die.
No. It's to make your character look cool while killing them. That's their purpose.
Or to perhaps get overconfident until you throw the
the guy who actually has a name, the bad guy. I fucking wrote his stats up, so he's gonna fucking wipe your ass.
The dreaded villain with the character sheet.
Yeah, wipe the floor with you.
Damn straight.
So what was, of course, then we mentioned this before, the Masks of Nyar Lothotep campaign, which I highly recommend to any Call of Cthulhu players.
We've already talked about my favorite moments.
Yeah, the tea shop. I think that was the last episode, or was that the first episode?
That was the second. That was the second episode of that.
So download our previous episodes. All right.
Please.
Yeah.
Anyway. But no, that there was a lot of moments did work in that.
It had some of the similar things.
But that game was so long, we had both successes and failures in that.
I mean, I remember, one thing that similarity between that and the Hunter campaign was handouts, clues, props. I mean, Mask is really good about that because they're already written. You just have to photocopy them and hand them to players. Like, here's this guy's diary. Here's this clue.
Yeah, and once again, you were on your game through a lot of it with like a lot of the NPCs. They didn't all just have that voice. It was like, you need to go here, and the woman says, "Yes, you must go and rescue my daughter, please." You actually got into it too.
Yeah.
Like, not all of the NPCs had monotone voices.
Which one stands out to you the most?
Well, I don't know. Crap. That's been a
while. Anything that comes to mind. I mean, give me an example, because I get
you do good cultists.
Yeah, crazy.
You can do the crazy obsessed people, like the bloody tongue guy that snuck into our hotel room in New York.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can do some pretty good cultist rantings.
Yeah.
Before we break out the Tommy gun and kill him.
Yeah. I remember, New York was interesting because, I mean, it was sort of slow to begin with, but I remember you guys were so wary of the Juju shop. None of you even went into it. And there's this really cool encounter that you totally missed because you were rightfully freaked out by it. Like, no, we're not going there. Not at all. I think you went there like once during day and you had guns like hidden on your person and you like just...
like one of us had a Tommy gun under a trench coat.
Yeah, and like you're just so freaked out by the whole thing, like you wouldn't even entertain the idea of going into the basement. And let alone go in at night. So that was kind of interesting that you were like, no, it was just setting off your PC radar that this is a death trap, and it kind of is. But there's some really, oh well, no one can get through the entire every single thing in the campaign. It's it's a big campaign, and we hit most of it. I mean, you guys hit all the continents. But even Australia, but anyways,
it's like, but also that game also had some pretty boner moments in it too.
Yeah,
not usually. I mean, once again, God, I'm really complimenting you today. Not often through the fault of you. It's more that there's a jackass player in the group.
Yeah. In particular for masks, there was a lot of PC attrition. So I noticed, like, at the beginning of the campaign, you would be doing, I'm going to be a reporter, I'm going to be a professor, I'm going to be, a normal person, a normal investigator. By the end of it, it was
by about the 5th session, I am a German World War I veteran who's a master of all forms of firearms.
Yeah, exactly. And the very end of the campaign, I remember Curry and Dan were playing brother and sister Soviet assassins, and
who are Tsarist supporters.
Yeah, exactly, on the run. And then Patrick was playing like a gun runner with maxed out gun skills and dodge skills and all this other stuff. It's like you go from normal people to hardened combat veterans who are merciless killers, and using like the Hitman character template in the 20s handbook and all this other stuff. It's like, I want to kill
soldiers, and we had a whole bunch of soldiers and hitmen.
Yeah, basically, you just got tired of
and one person would bite the bullet and know things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would be the character that actually knew some things.
Yeah, it's kind of like a D&D group. There's the one cleric, the one thief, the one cleric to heal the party, the one thief to unlock traps and doors. Everyone else must kill.
Like, it's basically
fighters
it's a couple of support vehicles and a whole bunch of main battle tanks. Basically.
Yeah, basically. Which I find entertaining. But, I mean, to be fair, the campaign does have a lot of scenes of you versus a few hundred angry cultists.
Well, yeah, the scene alone at the mosque being being
in Africa.
moshed by.
Was that really sort of freaky or tenseful for you?
It was tense, but it certainly wasn't horror. That was certainly more along the lines of a Stephen Sommers movie. Than
Definitely. Lives of the Mummy,
I mean, none of us were really afraid until the weird monster showed up.
Oh, yeah.
But for the most part,
someone got eaten in that.
Yeah, someone. I forget who it was, but someone was devoured.
I think it was Dan.
Could have been, but for the most part, it was just up on top of a wall with a Tommy gun, just mowing down hordes, and
good fun
for all.
But yeah, again, there were you did mention some of the bonus. I remember we brought in different players towards the end.
Who were there for 1 or 2 sessions.
Yeah, and Ward and one of his friends, Drew, especially. Ward was kind of on the borderline. His friend Drew was really bad because in one part in the Australia campaign, spoilers ahead, there's this weird inbred family of bad people, and they're not cultists or anything. They're just bad, and they have one of the sons is retarded, and you guys overpowered them. You had some sort of conflict with them, but at the end, you had this retarded guy, at your mercy basically, and they decided to execute him. That's
not none of us were really insane by that. Our current characters, were insane,
and that was kind of put a bad taste on that session because it's them and the Tard killers. I think they were killed pretty soon afterwards.
And Call of Cthulhu weren't mentioned because if you have a player that's never played it before, they're probably not going to be used to the no problem can be solved with brute. Not every problem can be solved with brute force.
Yeah,
and they'll actually some of them. Some bad people, they've taken offense. Like, wait, I lose sanity for just seeing a dead body? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. That's true.
And it's the same place. Some players don't want to be scared.
Yeah, I think some players especially D&D is really bad about teaching players that every encounter can be overcome.
Well, it's like in the Book of Vile Darkness, Asmodeus, Lord of the Ninth, has a challenge rating, the hit points and everything. That kind of takes away from
I mean, Cthulhu has hit points and stats too, but
how often do you actually encounter him?
Depending on the game. The difference is in the design philosophy. In D&D, you're supposed to overcome the majority of your challenges. You're supposed to defeat the bad guys, solve the puzzle, save the girl, whatever.
And Cthulhu, I don't care if you're piloting the USS Missouri, you're not going to take him out.
Right, you're supposed to survive. And there are monsters you just have to run away from. And D&D players can't get
they cannot get that through
the idea of running away from monsters that seem defeatable is just alien to them.
I mean, it's even Cthulhu, come on, it's a colossal aberration. I've seen worse.
Yeah, I mean, I know even halfway through the campaign, you guys would just run from a lot of monsters or just get the hell out of the way, like the Bayakis.
Or even the encounter with the cats in Egypt.
Oh yeah,
that was another really good moment.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I thought so.
Okay.
Where we actually kind of helped Bost, but her cats kept showing up, and
was that freaky or is that?
I thought that was pretty freaky.
Okay.
Often it's the little shit that's freaky rather than Cthulhu arises from the water.
One thing I did in that mass that I've done for a while in Cthulhu is that I never try and describe the monster specifically. I mean, I'll use specific monsters from the book, obviously.
With the players, we're all familiar. We know immediately what it is.
I mean, and like I'd say, it's the horrible thing, the rough shapen thing with wings bursting through the door. You hear its terrible cry. Its inhuman visage, terrifies you to your soul. I mean, I described it as an impression, as an emotional thing, rather than just, it's a bayaki or it's a hunting horror that's descending upon you and going to eat your ass.
Well, come on, like we're also D&D players. We're like, yes, it's a ghoul. Okay, well, here's their advantages and disadvantages, their weaknesses.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, and that's not foolproof, even if you give it just a rough description of what it can and can't do. I mean, eventually, the knowledgeable players are going to figure it out. Like in that World War I game we played in at Gen Con, like halfway through, it's like, his blood's been sucked out by an invisible monster with sucker holes. Oh, well,
Star Vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
Of course, by then my first character had been killed. So.
Well, like you fell. You didn't die from blood loss. You fell off the Zeppelin.
Yeah, I wish you see, if I knew the rules, if like I was so afraid of setting off the thing that I didn't want to, end the entire game by blowing up the Zeppelin. So I would have shot at it, but I decided to risk it, knowing my horrible dice rolls,
Well, yeah, you died.
Yeah, I died.
Proudly.
Yeah. Anyways.
That's another thing of Call of Cthulhu is you can't be super attached to your characters, but you can't view them as cannon fodder either.
Yeah, I mean, players get too decent. I think that's sort of a mechanism of like, I'm not scared by anything. They view their characters as disposable, and you can't really. Call of Cthulhu has that reputation, but you really can run a subtle game where you can have a character lasting for years. It just depends on what type of game you're in.
Hotep, there is no time for some psychoanalysis to recover sanity or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a very nasty campaign in general. I mean, even if your character did recover all their sanity or most of it, like it's just those, invading temple compounds and crap like that, and they're going to get their ass eaten or killed.
That's Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, well, that's mass though. There are Call of Cthulhu games that are much more subtle, like where you don't lose very much sanity, where it's more like.
Well, the one book I have,
it depends on the
Return to Innsmouth.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of just outright just scare the crap out of you shit.
Yeah, so don't shut down as a player just because you're playing Call of Cthulhu and just because your character could die. I mean, really, commit yourself to it. Commit yourself I think is the wrong word, but
well, then again, we could go on.
Give it an honest chance.
We could go on about Call of Cthulhu, but we've had successful horror in other situations, like your Pleasant Glades game comes to mind,
which is available on RPGnow.com. Look up Pleasant Glades.
Plug.
Yeah. Well, I don't get any money from it. It's like for $2, it's a PDF you get from Misfit Studios.
Ross wrote it, so he's really proud.
I got paid $50. If you really, give me a good review on it. There's like 2 reviews on it, and anyways, it's a D20 modern adventure, and the basic idea is that there's this small town in America where this weird signal basically makes everyone in the town go insane, and it's broadcast through every electronic
device. For the record,
device.
yes, I know that many of you have heard about that book of Stephen King, The Signal, and the movie that's coming out. This is this is independent of that.
I wrote mine in 2005, which is also the year I was doing the Hunter the same time I was doing the Hunter campaign.
In fact, it was the same group that play tested that.
Yeah, that's true. I think there's 1 or 2 different players, but
Aaron wasn't in that one.
Yeah, it was a very different sort of campaign, or it was a one-shot.
Because it worked because I think it was D20 modern, and all of us were into it once again because we want to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, if we could figure the plot out right away, like, now we have to find the right set of circumstances that'll get us to finding out what we already know.
Well, yeah, but again, you were playing very like first or third level characters, pretty low level modern D20 modern characters, and they're pretty. And
we were playing investigators, like
not combat monkeys,
so not combat monsters.
Yeah.
In fact, I think only one of us was playing a tough hero. I think the rest were there were smart heroes and a couple of the wisdom based ones.
Dedicated.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, everyone, like the thing is the signal in Pleasant Glades drove everyone to a different sort of insanity. Like
some people just couldn't look away from.
Some people thought the apocalypse was happening. Some people had other, very specific types of delusions, and so they had these different narratives, these different stories from these people, and everyone affected by it had their own sort of challenges.
And there was also the rival team that came in.
Yeah, and so there was some violence in it, but it was just sort of like I didn't explain everything at the end, or it was sort of very vague. I didn't like this is exactly how it's happening. Blah blah blah. Horror, a lot about it is about the unknown, what you don't know. So give the players an incomplete picture, basically. What else do you remember from that?
Yeah, well, most I remember that I don't think any shots were ever fired, as far as I remember.
Yeah,
I think there might have been our tough hero fired, found a pistol in a police station, and
yeah.
But of course, it was still like some of us went right to our old, routines, and the moment we found out something was really bad wrong in this town, some of us went straight to the police station to try to find some guns.
Yeah, that's a typical player character.
Yeah, but others of us actually got down to investigating, and
yeah. Again, it's one thing. Of course, I think horror actually works better in a modern or a contemporary or real world setting,
20th century kind of thing.
21st century.
Yeah. It's more familiar.
Yeah, the familiar turned unfamiliar, or something very, it's when you're in a fantasy world, everything is totally different. So there's not as much frame of reference to work out. But when you have a nice, normal American town, that's suddenly everything.
Silent Hill comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly, Silent Hill.
Or to a lesser extent, some of the Resident Evil games.
Yeah. I think it just sort of works better. Of course, I mean, this isn't to say you can't run horror in other genres. I think there's certain very good adventures campaigns written in it. I think there's a Call of Cthulhu thing set in the near future where there's a colony on Mars. I think it's called End Times. And then, of course, there's lots of fantasy adventure horror, Ravenloft, to mention one. So, but again, it sort of depends. But yeah, anyways, so we'll be back in a moment, and Tom will have a letter, and we'll be talking more about horror.
You all love those letters, I know.
Yes. All right. And we're back, and Tom has a very special letter for this Halloween episode of RPPR. So, Tom.
Thank you, Ross. Dear every evil wizard or warlord in every D&D game I've ever played in, before I begin this letter in earnest, I'd like to thank all of you for all the fun you've given me in D&D. I don't think that the various campaigns I've participated in over the years would quite be the same without the hours of poking around the horrid dank tombs that your final remains call home. Sometimes I've even met some of you, in one state or another, at the heart of the immense tomb. Those meetings rarely ended peacefully, but always with an interesting outcome. But, as you can imagine by my D&D playing self, I have lots of time to reflect on inane and inconsequential thoughts. And after a particularly long reflection while trying to sit through the incredibly tedious Saw 4 this weekend, a revelation hit me. This is a revelation I must pose to you all, even though it may cast doubt on the dungeon crawls I've enjoyed for so long. That revelation is it really necessary to construct those endless dungeon labyrinths in the first place? I know that it's almost a requirement for people of your power and reputation to build these dark underground mazes of madness and death, but is it really that important in the grand scheme of things? In the case of you dark wizards and sorcerers out there, I can see how it might be to your advantage. After all, death certainly isn't the end for you, what with lichdom and whatnot. You can keep hold of all that you have acquired and keep on existing throughout eternity. And I have never heard of some undead horror living in the cozy, bright mansion in the middle of town. Dark, creepy dungeons are the perfect retirement homes for those such as you. No, my quandary is leveled at you evil warlords who command armies and conquer nation after nation, all in a quest for slaves, plunder, and power. I respect all of you for the invaluable service you provide for adventurers such as myself. Without evil villains like you, we would be adventurers without a cause. Much like Luke Skywalker would be just another rocket sled jockey hitting on his sister without Darth Vader to make him a hero. So I know we need you. But do you really need dark tombs to house everything you've acquired in your lifetime of rape and pillage? Most of you are the non-magical fighter type, and it's unlikely that you will continue on in some undead state to conquer more lands. No, when you die, it's more than likely you will simply be a pile of remains rotting away underground. I know it's a huge ego thing to have a burial site that reflects your wealth and power, but let's be realistic here. If you've been properly evil, then no one will want to remember you. Your tomb will be nothing more than a playground for legions of do-gooder heroes coming to test themselves and plunder all of the wealth and items that contained therein. Wouldn't all the resources you put into your massive underground tombs of terror be better spent elsewhere? Perhaps it's that you can't think of anything else that could use all your ill-gotten treasure. If that's the case, I have the perfect solution. Instead of spending your blood money on a huge tomb for yourself, why not invest that money and power in a worthy successor? If you know that death is close at hand, whether from old age or impending forces of light smashing down your walls, arrange for another up-and-coming warlord to receive your treasure and magical items. That way, when the forces of light finally take back the lands you've conquered and slay you in your fortress, they won't be able to use the treasure you rightfully stole to ease the suffering of your unworthy peasants. The heroes will have their hands full helping the recently liberated nations recover from your oppressive rule, allowing your successor time to organize and consolidate his own power and prepare the way for a new empire of evil to rise. When you think about it, this is almost your duty in the world. Remember, evil warlords are an invaluable resource in every fantasy gaming world. And with a proper reallocation of plunder and magical items, evil warlords can be a renewable resource.
All right, we'll be back in a sec. And we're back. Anyways, of course,
we didn't really go anywhere, but
yeah, we just put in I put in a little bit of music, so it's it's kind of like a radio show.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I want to mention a couple things before we get to the anecdote of the episode. Want to send a shout out, thanks to Seamus Young, who's created a very funny webcomic called DM of the Rings. It's finished, but you can go through the whole thing. I'll put a link up on our website. He's taken the Lord of the Rings movies, taken screenshots from them, and added in little text bubbles and captions to make it a D&D game where, of course, the players want to loot the dead orcs, and hate the DM for railroading them so much, and really gets into the absurdity of most dungeon crawling games, and very, very, very amusing. So I highly recommend it. Let's see. Also, we've lately, just so you know, at the table we do our RPPR. I've been running a game of Rain, Greg Stoll's very fun fantasy RPG using the one roll engine. Tom is of course in that game.
Yes, I am.
And it's very fun, very different dynamic than D&D, because players aren't so concerned with personal loot and treasure as they are.
Yeah, we have responsibilities.
Yes, yeah, you have your own little company, and you want to make it rich, and you want to generally be bastards. You're trying to do, doing inside dealing, trying to sort of backstab, see how you can get rid of the competition.
Well, come on, we're only a few words away in the name of our company from the East Empire Trading Company.
Yeah, so East India, yeah.
So we're bastards by nature in this.
Yeah, it's pretty. For me personally, running the game is very fun, just to see how the players squabble and argue about what they should do next. I just. Ross
just shuts up and looks at us with a smile on his face.
Just, oh wait, we need to do this. Oh, we need to do that. Oh my god, how are we gonna do this? It's very amusing.
We haven't called anyone a Nazi yet, which is, I think that's a sign of our maturity.
Yes, but it's a very amusing game. I highly recommend it. Please go out and buy it. It's a great game. All the supplements are free. The main book will only set you back $40, I think. So, or $50, but still, it's worth it. So, if you ever want to do mass combat or mass, like very high end
mass intrigue, even.
Yeah, intrigue, diplomacy, politics, not being anything greater than just a couple of guys looking for loot. This is the sort of fantasy you want. So, anyways, one last shout out.
I really didn't have anything, Ross.
No.
Okay, fine. I'll make a shout out. I'd like to have a shout out to the makers of Vault.
Veiled.
Or Veiled, as we end up calling it for some reason.
It powers
powers us. It fuels us through the games. Because sometimes we have to, because there are oftentimes Ross's plots are really boring.
Oh,
and we fall asleep.
Ow.
Does that hurt you?
It hurt.
Take that.
Yeah, well, your mama's so fat. When she walks, she needs to use the D8 splash diagram to find out where her rolls of fat land. For those
listening, Ross has recently been reading a list online, so he's been dying to break some of them out.
Your mama's so dumb. When Lithids meet her, they go vegetarian.
Anyway, let's try to keep on task here, Ross.
Yeah, burn.
Yes,
okay.
Way to go.
Your mama's so old, she think dwarf is still a class.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Okay, Thyko is wacko. Wacko is wacko.
Well, obviously.
Okay.
Stencil it to your head.
All right, chance to hit armor class 0. Anyways, so now we have, of course, the last segment of our show, gaming anecdote.
And in the spirit of things, we'll make them horror anecdotes.
Okay.
And I have one. Certainly, I think the most... White Wolf, I think, especially first and second edition, really tried to be a horror game, a game of personal horror, especially vampire.
Yeah.
Werewolf still was kind of the munchkin game of White Wolf from the beginning. But vampire, they really tried to make it a horror, but the most successful White Wolf game I was in, horror-wise, was none of those, but a Project Twilight game, where you are playing government agents. In our case, we were FBI agents from the Special Affairs Division, kind of White Wolf's version of the X-Files. And my friend Sean, who's since moved away, was running that one, and Sean had a gift with making games creepy and frightening.
Yeah.
And I just remember there was a time, we were out exploring an old farmhouse, and of course our car broke down.
Yeah.
Well, by that I mean our tires were slashed because we ran over a hidden spike trap in the gravel road.
Kind of like the hills have eyes, sort of thing.
Kind of, yeah. And we were forced to walk the route, and Sean was pretty successful with providing noises like distant howling, and the fact that we stopped, for both of us, me and my friend David, we stopped and still heard footsteps behind us. We never actually saw what was following us.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Don't show. Sometimes you want to show the monster in all its glory. Weird since you just described it. Sometimes you don't. You just want to fuck with them.
But yeah, we eventually did see the main monster in the middle of this little town, which was a massive Bane possessed black spiral dancer.
Of course, you didn't know what the hell that was, or
No.
your characters didn't.
No, but he had a rule that I think really helped in White Wolf to make the horror, in that we were not allowed to have willpower 10 to start with.
Yeah.
And that was, it leads to another anecdote I think is a major problem of White Wolf, which is willpower 10 is the ultimate FU to any kind of horror White Wolf has.
Yeah, it says you don't want to be scared. You don't want to play a horror game, really.
It says you want to play an action game.
Yeah. I remember a character you played where it was a kinfolk, but you had Firearms 5.
Yeah,
and,
actually, I remember the Rock had just come out.
Yeah.
And I was basing him off Ed Harris's character from that.
And Firearms 5, an Arsenal 5.
Strength and Brawling of 5.
And Willpower 10, of course.
Which, I was actually the biggest combat monster, even though we had werewolves in the group, too.
Yeah, you just min-max the hell out of it.
I mean, yeah, it's like, just wielding an M16 or an M60, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I think it was set up so that the human folks would basically have the same number of points as werewolves. So even though werewolves were inherently better at combat, the humans were all more experienced than the werewolves.
And, of course, willpower 10, nothing really scared me.
Yes, you're immune to the delirium, you're immune to blah, blah, blah. You have 10 dice, you have all these little points you can burn off for automatic successes. Yeah, it's... again, this sort of min-maxing goes against horror, and horror, it shouldn't be based... The horror of the game shouldn't be based on whether your character is efficient enough to defeat the monster. I mean, it shouldn't be about that. It's not an action game. I mean, it's not a tactical thing.
I think, character-wise, often being assigned... choosing from a list of characters is often more effective than
pre-generated
your own.
characters.
I remember one horror game... one of the few horror games I ran with you was that GURPS game.
Uh-huh.
Kind of back in the day, and I had
I
had about 7 pre-generated characters.
Yeah,
and I believe you actually chose the guy who was a borderline sociopath.
Yeah, had voices in his head, had the whole deal. Yeah, that was pretty fun.
I think I bollocksed it up towards the end.
Yeah.
But I think even you told me, horror aficionado that you are, that the beginning and the middle were pretty good.
Yeah. Endings are tough. I mean, you've built up the suspense. It's trying to carry it out in this, dramatic finale.
Which I did, but then I had to get to the end. And
yeah. It's sort of it's tricky to learn. Pacing in a game is very different because the players are not only the audience, they're the collaborators for it, and they have their own ideas on how they want to
exactly.
do it.
And
yeah,
best laid plans can turn to crap in an instant.
But yeah, so that's the point is, of course, to I forgot the point, but anyways, that's all we have to say about horror for now. Happy gaming, and we'll see you next episode for Role Playing Public Radio.
Remember, listen to us, please. We feed upon the popularity. Without it, we are nothing.
Thanks. Don't way to be not desperate.
Anytime, Home Slice.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.